Normally also if it is comfortable, wear a surgical mask, not only for everyone, not for this class. And don't do the most genius thing like whenever you start why masks are supposed to be. Contrary to popular belief, mask is not for your protection, mask is for protection of others. When I sneeze, when I cough, the droplets are not supposed to go out. That is why we wear masks. People, if people wear mask all the time, exactly when they get the sneeze, they remove the mask, they sneeze, and they put it back. Unfortunately, nobody told them why mask is important. Okay. So we'll try to look at the editorials last 3 days, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. What is the most important line in this entire essay? At least your personal opinions. Have you read this article?
The earlier, the earlier
Article.
right? The bridge between the missing in delivery, welfare delivery. So that is the reason you have to accept foreign fundings and all. So I see that as core theme.
Well, line. The core theme is very evident, right? As he rightly pointed out, the last mile delivery is not possible by the state. So state cannot delivery or connect the last mile. So NGOs are very, very important for the last mile connectivity. Yes. Then
accepting for political parties is I think that kind of like you're accepting for political parties, yes, but then why this hypocrisy?
That is something we have also discussed.
Yes, sir.
Then I find this line most appropriate. Its appetite to collect data is matched only by its reluctance to share data. I think that is exactly where civil society activism is needed. Its appetite to collect data. That means state is very interested in knowing everybody's data, but state is not at all interested in sharing any data. So that is exactly the problem. Why we blame every report as anti-national report? Yes or no? So when is the last agriculture census conducted? 2015-16. The last agriculture census is conducted in 2015-16. We don't have last census data, right? Employment data are not accurate. Yes, so there is a huge lag in release of the government reports. SECC data 2011 has not been released till date. So like this, there is a huge amount of discrepancy. So because of all these things, it is very easy for the civil society to criticize the government. Probably that is one reason why government is very reluctant in making sure to give the treatment. So if you see today's front page, it's not only any article, right? See, these are very reputed. These are institutes of soft power. TTD, Ramakrishna Mission, Mother Teresa Ashram. So in spite of knowing, do they actually know, or is the system working in silos? Right hand not letting know the left hand, right? For example, think about the Ramakrishna Ashram, TTD. So is the system willing to take the shock? I mean, is it doing something like Article 370, knowing it very well? This is a systemic shock that we are giving to NGOs. Like there is a status quo. NGOs are functioning, temples are functioning. Nobody knows actually what is happening. Okay, so it's high time we give the system a shock. Okay, so that we will rectify everything. We will change everything. Maybe this is like an external pressure that government is bringing for all these organizations to, come on par with any other auditing. For example, auditing may not be in the expected lines. Okay, for TTD or anyone, they were reluctant till now to change the things because chalta hai. Everything is going on. Now that there is a systemic shock, you have to rectify yourself so that you will be on par with anyone. So knowing this is the system doing, or all these are collateral damages. You get the idea?
For how long can they suffocate this?
Okay.
Like as we discussed, democracy heals itself.
Hmm.
They'll proud and even today's article has this last line, sir. Whoever they can reapply. The government official said they can reapply.
It's not like they are barring anyone, right? All you have to do is follow the rules. Nobody is beyond and above the rule of law. So system is doing very well, knowing whatever it is doing. So that is the basic assumption. So that might be probably the systemic shock. That means if I say all the people who are alive who deserve this particular scholarship should come to the institution, okay, then all the ghost beneficiaries will automatically be eliminated, or all the institutions which are afraid to renew probably have something to hide, or something like that might come out. So that might be the thought process behind this entire exercise. So both the sides are equally true. There are good arguments on the side of the government also, and at the same time there are good arguments on the side of the NGOs. But slowly, sooner than later, they will try to find balance. They won't coexist. It will hurt each of them equally. So, for example, prelims last time they have asked questions like the official name of Reporters Without Borders or Doctors Without Borders is Reporters Sans Frontiers. Okay, so this is the term you have seen in the news related to what?
Curd in English? Curd.
So that is a prelims question. Reporters Without Borders, Doctors Without Borders, all these are NGOs. So Press Freedom Index and other reports are created by this kind of NGOs. This is a good article. USA's vision in Indo-Pacific region. What is changing in Indo-Pacific region?
Japan is getting interested.
Japan and Australia went for an agreement on November 19th itself. Then? Okay.
ASEAN countries are gaining more importance.
ASEAN centrality is the core theme of multiple policies. ASEAN centrality is what Prime Minister also have encouraged. So we have to give that ASEAN centrality, no doubt about it. Can we say the multilateralism is very much in play at Indo-Pacific region? The multilateralism is very much at play in Indo-Pacific region. Who are the heavy players? Basically, China and USA. So barring China and USA, for example, Japan and Australia, Japan, India and Australia. So like this, these small players are also taking very proactive role. So what people like to call it as minilateralism. Okay, multilateralism is also leading to minilateralism. So that means not only the initiative have to come from the other power, that is the USA. To control China, we don't only need USA. We are doing on our own, right? We are doing it on our own. Even Europe is willing, France is willing. So like this, all small, all rising, aspiring powers are also willing to participate in Indo-Pacific region. So what we call as minilateralism. But each and every country wants to be superpower on its own individually. Japan wants to be a superpower. USA wants to be a superpower. UK was a superpower. Right? Like this, everybody wants to be a superpower. Now, this article is purely from the point of view of USA. So what USA is thinking and what is he trying to tell? America's Indo-Pacific policy, that much is evident, and America has made sure that its full focus is on China. America had made sure that its full focus is on China. Unlike all the small countries, America has nothing to do or nothing to be afraid of China. America is directly naming China and blaming China. India won't do the same things, as we will see in next article. Sushant Singh Rajput has lambasted the Indian government left, right, and center for being very, very weak. Right. Next. He's talking about the entire Indo-Pacific region being affected by China's expansionist policies. Right? All of us know, from west coast of Africa to east coast of Africa to west coast of USA is considered as Indo-Pacific region. That is the classification given by Prime Minister Modi. From east coast of Africa all the way till just imagine the world map. Yes, huge region. That entire region, as Prime Minister Modi called it as Indo-Pacific region. Indo-Pacific region is very, very important. And in this area, there is a huge amount of Chinese expansionism. There is a huge amount of Chinese expansionism. And one more thing is, China does not adhere to international laws. China did not respect the international tribunal judgments in relation to Philippines. Yes, what we call as the famous 9-line judgment. Yes, 9-line judgment. I hope you know all these things already, right?
No, 9-line judgment I didn't know.
So, all of you know exclusive economic zones, easy, the territorial concept. Yes. So, China claims, see, let's imagine this is how China sees. My thumb is China, okay? This is Philippines. My thumb is China, this is Philippines. So, in between these two, China constructed a small artificial island. Okay, just like this, China has constructed a small artificial island. Now it has said, now it is saying my EEZ is expanding. You understand the
Yes,
logic,
sir,
right?
yes, sir.
Just normally, I would think commonsensically, India's SEG is 5,000 kilometers. But because of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, we have 7,000 kilometers of exclusive economic zone. Okay, so India's mainland is very far from Andaman. Because of Andaman, our EEZ has increased. In the same logic, China has constructed artificial islands, and it is claiming that my EEZ is further inroads. Okay, normally if you remove this, Philippines and China should have a balanced exclusive economic zone. Okay, so in relation to this, Philippines took China to an international court, and international court gave the judgment in favor of Philippines, and China said, I won't respect the judgment. Case khatam. Because there is no superpower which can impose the judgment on China. So that is a famous case called as 9-line. What is 9-line? China has drawn 9 lines, 9 dots on a map and said these 9 lines are our territory. 9-line. Artificial sea boundary. Okay. So that is the problem. Okay. Yeah. And this is a repeated theme we hear. Threat to freedom of seas, including freedom of navigation and overflight. This is a very, very common term you hear. Free, open, and inclusive world trade. Yes or no? Or rule-based order. So every time we say the rule-based order, who are we targeting?
China.
China. Okay. Next. So China might have a lot of impact on the global trade. So outrightly, US is making sure that China is being blamed. 9-line. So China has rejected an international tribunal ruling against Philippines. Okay. Again, all of you know, Quad is very, very interested in the thing. And I think one more line he nicely mentioned is this one. Remember this? It's a new theater. It's a new zone. You can write that in your answers directly. Quad or Asia's pivot, US's pivot to Asia are not about containing China, are not about US dominance. Indo-Pacific is a region of its own. It's a no man's land. It should not be for any one superpower, right? So that is also a very interesting theme that you need to remember. Indo-Pacific region. See, the Indo in Indo-Pacific is not about India. It has nothing to do with India. It is about Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So the entire region has a lot of potential. 60% of the world trade, 80% of India's trade in volume, all these things happen in this region. And there are also 4 strategic choke points. What are choke points?
Screen sharing stop.
What do you understand by choking? To suffocate someone is choking. So what is choke point? Strait of Malacca is a choke point. So all these narrow straits in international seas where the trade travels through a small geographical land. Huge ocean, but there are small islands. Between those 2 islands, you have to pass through. Strait of Malacca in Indonesian region, right? Like this, Strait of Hormuz, all these are called as choke points. So whoever controls these choke points will control the international trade. Okay, so that is also one reason why we need to have free, open, and inclusive free trade order, so that freedom of navigation will always be there. The term freedom of navigation is very, very important. It also applies to China. That means tomorrow USA cannot start choking a point and suffocate China's trade. Yes, freedom of navigation is freedom of navigation for everyone as long as you follow the rules. Okay, even China is free to do business, but China should follow international rules and regulations. It's not an anti-China policy. It's a free, open, and rule-based order policy. So we don't want to change the rules-based order in the world. If we have one rogue nation, tomorrow USA, if a judgment comes against USA, USA will also say, I won't listen. If China won't listen, USA won't listen. Who will listen? Only the weak has to follow the rules, while the rich and powerful can bypass the rules. No. What are the other dynamics that have happened in the Pacific region? USA finding a lot of partners. Such partners are Japan, Australia. Australia is very proactive, right? India. So all these countries are very proactive in Indo-Pacific region. So the summary is USA should not be blinded by any regional groupings. USA should actually show a lot of sincerity in implementing all these activities. So after Afghanistan's withdrawal from Afghanistan, Joe Biden explicitly said that our focus will be solely on China. So it needs to push a lot of effort, political capital and financial capital into sustaining all these things. The advantages are COVID. COVID is a bullet that China did not see coming. Okay, it's a bullet that you don't see kills you. Yes, in the same logic, COVID is one thing that China never planned or anticipated in all its universal plan. So probably that is how universe is reacting to China. Point number 2, when China's drama of COVID and all these things, or because of COVID, people understood the over-reliance of China, over-reliance on China. So the world is trying to diversify. Okay, the world is trying to diversify. Second thing, Belt and Road Initiative is about to fail. Belt and Road Initiative is about to fail. The debt trap diplomacy is no longer working, right? Not only that, it will also create political ramifications in China. Why? China has given billions of dollars to all these small countries. Okay. Now the countries are not in a position to repay the loans, right? So even if I ask new loans, the companies, China is not giving the money. So China as a nation is losing money. Chinese companies are getting profits, but the overall theme is China's citizens will demand, where is our money? You have given 1,000 crores to Zambia or Sudan or some small African nation. What happened to that money? Why is it not coming back? Where are our rewards? Okay, so all this money accumulated will yield a huge amount of debt for China. Second thing, your influence in this region will also stop as you stop pumping the money. As I told you, your power is not soft power. You are just buying the friendship with money. As long as you have money, the country is in your favor. But if you stop giving it money, it may or may not listen to you, right? These are all the real-time problems that China is going to face. So minilateralism is also very much in the play. All the small countries are also realizing how to tackle China. So it's very, very evident that China is going to have a lot of troubles and its rise is no longer smooth. Okay, so that is a famous idiom, right? Mao, bide your time and hide your strength. Bide your time and hide your strength. So I think China has some few years too soon. Yes, there is a Telugu song, right? Tondarapadi oka koila munde kusindi. You know, yes, I think that means China should have announced its superpower in 2025 or 2026. Till then, it should have waited patiently. But for personal reasons or other reasons, China announced that it is a superpower 1 year before COVID. Okay, from next year onwards, time back. See, till 2008 to 2019, China's rise was not noticed. It was noticed in academic circles, but it did not have a long-term impact. Nobody objected. Just imagine, if India is launching Atmanirbhar Bharat, Europe is launching its own Atmanirbhar Bharat, every country is launching its own Atmanirbhar Bharat. Even Philippines is practicing drills against China. Just imagine the amount of enmity that you are gaining. So all the small things will come together and limit the China, Quad, AUKUS, so on and so forth. But this should not stop after 6 months. Why? After COVID, everything will go back to normal. We will also go back to China. Then that will be a huge problematic scenario. Disapproving the charge of conspiracy. We don't want to go into all such articles. The eligible denied benefits. Gram volunteers. What is your opinion on gram volunteers? What are gram volunteers?
So grassroots service delivery. That's one biggest thing. Best advantage with that. But unfortunately, if it is used for political reasons, then like it's a two-edged knife.
Okay. So we'll look it from UPSC syllabus point of view. Governance.
Yes.
Governance with accountability and transparency is
Good governance.
good governance. Governance with accountability and transparency is good governance. If you deliver it digitally, that is e-governance. So where does public service delivery come in? It is also good governance. It's a new extension of good governance. Public service delivery at doorstep. Public service delivery at doorstep, not e-governance, because these things cannot be delivered electronically. These things have to be delivered at your doorstep. So when I come to your home, when I verify your biometric in front of you and give you ration, there is accountability, there is transparency, and I also know I'm giving it to the right beneficiary. It will eliminate a lot of corruptions. Yes. So governments like Andhra Pradesh are creating doorstep delivery using an army of volunteers or part-time employees. Okay, that is basically the understanding of gram volunteers. So gram volunteers are a force which will deliver the public service at the doorstep. Okay, it's a good thing that states have introduced all these things. But is there any other way to do this? Was there a Simpler way. Yes. Second thing. Now what is this particular article saying? This particular article is saying Raitu Bharosa. Raitu Bharosa of 13,500 rupees or something is not given to eligible farmers because they were denied. They were exclusionary errors. They were excluded wrongfully. So if all the volunteers will enter the farmer households and give the money to the farmers, then automatically you are also helping each and every person. So that will eliminate corruption. That is the simplest argument they are trying to make. So you can use the same gram volunteer force to make sure that all the eligible beneficiaries of the farmers are also getting the due benefit. Till then, the argument is very fair. Okay, you understood the logic, right? I will come to your home, doorstep delivery, right? So it's a very good thing. I don't have to go to municipal office. I need a water connection. Municipal office will come to my home. I need a certificate. They will come to my home and deliver the things. So everything at doorstep delivery. This is pioneered both by Andhra Pradesh and Arvind Kejriwal, Delhi also. Okay, Delhi also have a lot of household home delivered public services, tap connections, certificates, birth certificates, death certificates, income certificates, so on and so forth. So that's a good thing. But the problem is, are there any other technical solutions?
The Gram Sabha is already there, sir. Strengthening Gram Sabhas can be a good move rather than using hefty, I mean, which is costly on pocket.
Okay. How to make sure that public service delivery is very efficient? Are we going for a costly way? Second thing, are we creating an institution? For example, all the unemployed youth will be called as gram volunteers. They will get certain amount of money. Tomorrow they will ask for permanent jobs. Day after tomorrow they will ask for pension. Yes or no? So isolated unemployment youth are weak. Collective unemployment youth are a power group, a pressure group. So tomorrow they might ask for more and more benefits. So giving them salaries is one thing. So you have to maintain a huge army of public service delivery people, their salaries, then delivering the goods. Are the goods being delivered in an efficient and effective fashion? You have to calculate all these costs also, right? So use gram volunteer the most efficient way that you can think of. Are there any other alternatives?
Also, this delivery.
Okay.
And give them the
Gram villages, right? Villages.
So can we use the Anganwadi workers as gram
They're
volunteers?
already overburdened. Anganwadi workers are overburdened. The 10,000 rupees salary, the 5,000 rupees salary, they are there. They don't have time to how to count it, right? They have so much money. 5,000 rupees per month. They're overwhelmed. Anganwadi workers. How do you create an efficient public service delivery system at doorstep? Is gram volunteer the only solution? Again, it's a misnomer, right? He is not a volunteer, he is getting paid. He is not getting paid.
No. Getting paid.
Volunteer.
They give money because government shouldn't do someone else for them with no cost. So,
Volunteers. You can take the help of civil society organizations. CM style.
So there should be real-time monitoring of the goods.
I think there is one more article, right? Jobless growth. People in today's editorial. I think you should read today's editorial. Instead of giving jobs, people are given honorariums, right? So that it can create a political army. If I don't give money to the unemployed youth, they might start demanding jobs. So if I give them something to buy their mobile phones and recharge their accounts, they're happy watching Zabardast. Okay. Yes.
this delivery is like a Swiggy or Zomato.
Sorry, in villages we don't have Swiggy and Zomato.
Also, public delivery, this system.
Huh?
delivering it to the doorstep.
It's more like Swiggy and Zomato.
So we thought we've seen that Swiggy and Zomato are working efficiently. On similar lines, we should be able to do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
Can we substitute the corporate social responsibility to this?
But we need to have empirical data, right? What is the spend? What is the money spent by the government? What is the CSR that the particular state is receiving? So can we divert that for this? That has to be substantiated empirically. Okay. So exclusionary errors are happening because of lack of ability for the system to modify itself in the right time. NPC in National Payment Corporation of India may not be the only solution. So that is one thought process that you have to develop. Whenever we can eliminate people, that is a money saving activity. Every time if I can deliver something directly, like instead of delivering goods, if I can give you certain amount of money, that is public service delivery, right? And obviously governments will charge some extra money from you to get the public service deliveries done to home. If you are willing to pay, that is fine. But if not, then you should go to the system that will reduce the burden. Okay, again, as I said, if you encourage DigiLocker and all these things, probably the need for certificates and all these things will also be eliminated. So technology should be brought in slowly. If at least 90% of the population is using technology, let's say even 70% of the population is using technology, only 30% are remaining the offline services, then we can also slowly reduce the number of people who needs to deliver that services. Optimizing and rationalizing the public service delivery is the long-term goal. I cannot 100% eliminate, right? I cannot eliminate all the public services online only. If I have to give food, there is no e-food. So food has to be given at doorstep. So let's see how it goes. But their argument is very right. And Raitu Bharosa is a top up over PM Kisan. Right? It's not like state is giving 13,000. It's like whatever central government is giving that plus state's money. So that is the top up. That is the reason for that particular argument. But I still am not totally 100% convinced that gram volunteers is the best way forward. There should be some rationalizing and optimizing mechanism. The Chinese challenge uncovers India's fragilities. So Sushant Singh is he used to be assistant editor in Indian Express. He is kind of it's obvious he's against the present government's stand or diplomatic standpoint of view. The other day, Srinivasan article, if you remember, he was full in praise of
India's
foreign policy. So Sushant Singh article is very critical of the government. So what are the salient themes that he's saying? That India have to have money. Economy is the only solution that India needs to have. As long as you have money, you can control the narration. As long as you don't have money, you are dependent on other players' actions. For example, he says that when Indian government is facing the stress from China, it has to reorganize its army structures from Pakistan to Chinese side. So now Pakistani's side, I mean, the two front war scenario is very much real. A 2.5 front war is very much real because Nagaland issue is going on, Khalistani movement is going on, Naxalism is going on. Then I have diluted the Pakistan side and put that army on Chinese side. I cannot provoke Pakistan. So all these things are very clearly showing that India is having a lot of weaknesses or fault lines. Point number 2, we are not hitting China face to face, or we are not taking the tough stand with China. Still we are kind of submissive to China's arguments. Like he takes two scenarios. One is where the Chinese ambassador criticizes two parliamentarians for attending the Tibet in exile government. Okay, Tibet in exile, there is a There is a group, there is a government of Tibet in exile. There is a prime minister for that country, for the population, and Dalai Lama is considered as the representative, right? He does not have any political affiliation. Dalai Lama is neutral, but there is a government called as Tibet in exile. So two ministers from Indian Parliament attended that meeting. So Chinese ambassador criticized it, and there was no rebuttal from Indian side. Yes, so that clearly shows that we don't want to antagonize China. Point number 1. Okay, and China renaming 15 cities, 15 villages within Arunachal Pradesh. That is also for namesake. Indian government has criticized it, saying okay, it does not change anything at the ground level. But he says in the future, China might use that argument to counter India's narrative. If you see this particular paragraph, he says the construction of border villages by China along with these villages will become handy for China when the principle of settled areas is invoked to resolve the border issues in the future. Okay, if there is an established village of a different country in any other country, automatically till then the boundary line will be extended. Probably China will use it to justify Arunachal Pradesh, or part of Arunachal Pradesh belongs to China. Nobody may believe China, but China will have some kind of argument. Right?
So because this border thing came, same is the situation with POK also. I read, I think, I don't remember the author. He's from OP Jindal. He writes on WTO and all.
Sriram Cholia.
No, sir.
Okay.
I read in that article that when it goes to arbitration for regarding this border dispute in international court, whoever has made more investments,
they will get the favorable judgment.
So with the CPEC thing, we have more or less lost POK is what the argument put forward by so many people. If that is so, then there is no hope for India in that case.
In CPEC?
No, sir. To probably reclaim the POK or COK.
See, the concept is not about reclaiming what we have lost. The concept is not to lose anything that we still have. Okay, so that is the core theme here. Aksai Chin is supposed to be there. We are talking about finger 4 here. So from that table end till here it is Indian territory. So we forgot about that everything. Now the Galwan incident is about here to here. So the discussion is they should not come from here to here. If you take Indian map, Aksai Chin is somewhere there. Okay, forgot Aksai Chin, forgot they came all the way till Pangangso Lake. Okay, so in Pangangso Lake we are talking about 4 kilometers of extension. Right, you get the idea. So it's nobody's argument that we will reclaim all the lost territory. That hope is long gone. Being very pragmatic, we know Aksai Chin, POK, and all these things are out of discussion. The only discussion is whatever we have now, will we be able to keep them? Right? Will China come to a consensus giving some part of this also? Right? Or will we ever gain POK? And without solving POK, we cannot solve Aksai Chin. And without solving Aksai Chin, we cannot think about POK. Unless Pakistan self-destructs itself and China loses all interest on Pakistan, like Pakistan becoming something like Sudan, Somalia, very, very useless for everyone, then probably things might change. India and China might come to a consensus for CPEC. India might start using CPEC. As Shiv Shankar Menon says, if we want to recognize BRI, give us back, POK, Gilgit-Baltistan. Technically called Gilgit-Baltistan is Indian territory. We will join CPEC. We also claim that India is a member of BRI. So this is something that might happen in future when China fails. Sorry, when Pakistan fails. Right? So you get the idea. So what he's trying to say is, we are domestically divided, which is not good for India. Economically, still we are very weak, very bad. Diplomatically boastful, has been found in its ability to deal with the future challenges. So to do all these things, what we need is Prime Minister's intervention. He has to talk to Xi Jinping and solve the issue amicably and put his personal diplomacy at best to resolve the issue quickly. Because we cannot keep on having the same discussion time and again, right? We need to solve the border issue with China. But as I keep saying, China's issue is not geographical issue, it's a political issue. China does not want to give up or solve the border issue. That is why China keeps on pestering India. It has no interest whatsoever to solve India's boundary issue. So tomorrow, even if I make Sushant Singh as Prime Minister of the country, he does not have a clue on how to deal with the Chinese. Why?
They don't want to.
If I don't want to settle an issue, nobody on the earth can make me, come and settle the issue. Right? It's not like Bangladesh and India. It's China and India. It's almost a superpower versus a upcoming power. So there will be a lot of calculations, complications, so on and so forth. So Chinese are nowhere interested. I haven't seen an iota of interest by the Chinese to solve the border issue. So that is why it keeps on pestering. Probably what we can have is normalcy, just like the normalcy we have for 30 years before 2020. So that kind of normalcy might be restored. But the problem with that kind of thinking is China might again after 20 years
Again,
provoke India. So it will always be like a glass wall. You will always be afraid when it will break. India does not want to have that. So I'm actually happy that China is doing this to India. So because of this, we will keep on focusing on the Atmanirbhar Bharat, indigenization, having more friends, inviting Australia to Malabar exercises, so on and so forth. Clearly taking a stand. China is making us help take a stand. If relations with China is normalized, probably we might go back into complacency. Yes or no? There was a time when people broke the MI TVs. You saw that videos, right? After Galwan, people came from balconies and broken their TVs so that they can purchase Vivo. One more Chinese company. No? So I think that is what made Israel strong. The continuous pressure. Yes. So probably this is wake-up call that India needed. So that we can counter China and go for alternative supply chains. Right? So if you compare Sushant Singh article and Srinivasan article, they are totally different. This article is more 100% critical that Indian government is very, very timid in dealing with China. Whereas that article is very much saying,
India
has dealt very nicely. But somewhere down the line, we have to also agree that there are some good points in Sushant Singh article also, that there is a failure at multiple levels, either in Pulwama incident or the Galwan incident. Yes.
Why doesn't India reciprocate the same way by leaving few places to China, saying that it's done?
We don't have the expansionist policy, right? And we have already respected China by saying Tibet belongs to China. One China policy is respected by China, right? So we don't fall to their level, right? We should rise them to our level, but probably we can counter them by strong diplomatic decisions. We can openly give more powerful statements to China saying that whatever you are doing is wrong. Something more punch.
They were against this Tibetan government in Israel and renaming these things. There was a statement in today's paper also.
A very nicely, masterfully written article, ignoring a lot of things. Yes? Post-independence consolidation, but more or less, it's like a personal anecdote. It's a good essay. When you read it, you find that passion somewhere. Sach ke aaspaas wala dukkh ko pakadna mushkil hai. I think this is one nice article where he includes a lot of things. He does the bhajan of Sonia Gandhi. And he definitely gives credit to Indira Gandhi. That is very much appreciated. But at the same time, he ignores a lot of things that Congress have failed to do. Okay. So this article is about, Indira Gandhi not being celebrated during 1971 war 50th anniversary. This is the 50th anniversary of 1971 war Bangladesh liberation. India took a very strong stand against Pakistan. We liberated Bangladesh in 13 days. Yes. There were times where USA threatened India if it goes against the Bangladesh liberation. USA actually threatened India that if you help Bangladesh, we will attack you. Then Indira Gandhi smartly did a peace and friendship treaty with Russia. In 1971 only, we also have a treaty with Russia. So Indira Gandhi already took the guarantees from Russia that in case if we go for the help of Bangladesh, if USA comes, you should come to our aid. So non-allied movement died, or tilted. The tilt of non-allied movement happened in 1971. That is also one point to notice. Okay, right? So there were different times back then. So we should definitely understand the importance of Indira Gandhi. She helped create or dilute the threat to India. Having two Pakistans on right and left side would have been a severe headache. And as you can see today, Bangladesh is flourishing. Bangladesh GDP, per capita income, everything is fantastic, whereas Pakistan is suffering. So India has done a good thing. Political parties should use those values even in normal times. For example, when 30 years we have peace, okay, we did not pressurize China enough. 30 years of normalcy was there between India and China. We were having a lot of agreements. We were having bilateral exchanges, business trade, $100 billion flourishing trade. So many things were happening. But we did not put the same kind of pressure on China that we are planning to do now. Second thing, we announced Make in India in 2015, but we did not pursue it very seriously. Why? Now going and renaming China is very easy. But in 2015, if we actually pursued Make in India policy, we would have been in a whole different place. Right? So having value is always a soft power. It is what makes India unique. Right? So not losing them is a trait. Losing them is very easy. For all the hatred, if you just blindly emulate China, then there is no difference between India and China. So value is what sets you apart. Everybody knows that. The problem is having values and taking action in the right time. So that's very, very important. That vision and consistency is lacking because of domestic politics. As I said, for 30 years, draw the map from 1970s till 2004, when India was having its own internal political issues. That is the time when China has to come. All the foundation done then repaid China after 2000s. If we keep playing the right game, one day it will click. But we were playing a whole different game of our own. So now we have understood the cost of that particular thing. Okay, so we can be happy that we are a $3 trillion economy, or we should be sad that we could have been a 7. Right? We could have been a 7 and still have values. That is the major theme that India should consider. Okay. Not technically very important for UPSC point of view, but 1 or 2 points that you can write. The cadres are from tribal groups, the leaders are from non-tribal groups, and that is a rift that is increasing in the Maoists. Tribal and non-tribal. So majority of the Maoist cadres are from tribals. Okay, as I said, the roots are from tribal areas because they are very well connected with the local population. The leadership is coming from different segments. So there is a discrimination within their cadres, and that is leading to the dilution of Maoist movement. And as you know, this article argues, many Maoist leaders are getting old, they are dying. So the strategy of India is to wait and watch. See, the state have unlimited patience. The state have unlimited time. We have 70 years. 1950, 2022, we are still waiting and watching. Prime ministers come and go. State is still there. Who is diluting? Maoism is diluting because of their own internal fights, their own lack of leadership, their own lack of cooperation. So that is also a strategy, patience. If you wait out, your opponents will die down. Okay. Second, they are having internal issues that will also create a lot of problems. Now, thanks to mobile phones technology, automatically there is a lot of information that is passing out from Maoists. So that is also one reason why Maoists are being eliminated by the state. So in every way possible, it's high time that Maoists realize that there is no future for them in a democratic country. Nobody is even believing in their ideology any longer. Okay. So probably if they give up, they start a political party, or they join the mainstream society, probably they will have better chance of bringing the grievances of the grassroots level to the public. Media will also be very interested in listening to their voice. Yes, the last mind collectivity, civil societies might help them. By taking up the arms, they are alienating themselves. They are not giving access to media, civil society. They are not serving the cause of the people who they are supposed to help. Right? So Maoism has no place in a democratic country like India. The system is not as bad as it used to be. The system is very, very sensitive now, thanks to next generation civil servants.
Well, that India-China theme, that political thing. There was an article written by S. Gurumurthy of Vivekananda. So he compares the construction of Yangtze Dam and Narmada Dam. The time we took for Narmada Dam was around 35-40 years. The Yangtze Dam started more or less the same time. They completed in 3 years. So it's a good way of comparing how infrastructural development took place.
What he did not mention is the environmental damage.
But true, sir.
See, again, that is what separates democracy, right? Democracy builds consensus. It's the failure of the politicians to build consensus. See, when democracy is in consensus, it will work 10 times faster than any communist or dictator leadership. Just think about it. If all the people wanted oxygen cylinders or oxygen plants, in 10 days, India has doubled or tripled its oxygen capacity. The same India, the same bureaucracy, the same people. Just think about it. In 10 days, in second wave, haven't we doubled or tripled our capacity? Yes or no? So that is the power of democracy. When democracy functions, nothing else will stop it. The only problem is lack of consensus. Okay. So bulldozing something, or constructing an Yangtze Dam, we have to appreciate the Chinese engineering, the speed and all those things, no doubt about it. But at the same time, who is listening to? At least in India, we can say environmental impact assessment has been diluted. Hindu will write one article. Okay, you will still construct the dam. Nobody will stop you. At least for record, there will be some criticism. People said, but still I constructed. In China, you won't have any such thing. Right? So that is what sets apart the democracy. Again, I find that argument multiple times. Not only Gurumurthy, so many people compare blindly the China. They have this the fantasy towards China that we have to be the dictatorship. India works only when there is dictatorship and all those things. I think probably one generation of Indians should get the experience of dictatorship. Then they will stop saying all these things. As far as I believe, democracy is working fine. The problem is lack of consensus, sincerity, and if you are doing the right things, people will obviously support you. The politics of minimum support price. So this article is not about MSP of food crops. Don't get fooled by that headline. MSP here is subsidies. MSP here is subsidies, welfare subsidies. There is a wonderful line: super capitalism. The interest of consumer and investor conflicts with
Citizen
and labor. The interest of consumer and investors conflict with whom? Citizen and labor. Are investors and labor different? Citizens and consumer different?
They're like one and the same, but
So I understand the difference between investor and labor, but consumers and citizens.
So that is super capitalism. So basically this article is corely targeted about people getting what is redistribution?
Those who accumulate wealth,
Hmm.
they pay tax, and those who cannot, those who like government.
Economy, what is the foundation code for economy, Indian economy or any economy? What is the core you know, underlying principle of economy? Mhm. In economics, when you read economics, what is the first quote that you learn in economics? Wants
Wants can never be fulfilled.
are unlimited.
Unlimited.
Resources are
Limited.
That is the core of economy, right? Why do we have a planned economy? Why do we have a system? Because wants are unlimited. Everybody wants a Benz car, everybody wants a 5-star hotel, everybody wants to live in a luxurious life, but the resources are very, very limited. So who should be able to distribute the resources? The state should redistribute the resources in the proper way. Again, resource distribution does not mean I will buy gold and give it to your family. That is not distribution, right? Resource distribution is creating that ecosystem where you will be flourishing. You will be able to procure whatever you want to, but resource is distributed in such a way that everybody is having the bare minimum access. Clear? Let's say construction of roads, giving a basic food, security, livelihood, house, sanitation, and all these things. What will create capability approach will be done. Automatically, everybody will flourish. Okay, so that is what is he talking about. That that you know, if we keep on giving resources for the sake of giving resources, are we actually empowering the people? Take Narega as an example. Why are we giving Narega funds? To keep the rural economy alive. Okay, subsidies are just to keep the rural economy alive. If I take out Narega, rural economy will collapse. So how long can I keep on giving the Narega? For next 20 years, 10 years? What is my long-term vision? You get the idea, right? I can keep pumping money into the system and I'm giving subsidy and I'm keeping the system alive. But am I empowering the system? What work done? Have you ever seen Narega work? And that is the problem, right? That is exactly what I'm arguing in theory. You're spending 70,000 crores for theory. You can go to Koti and buy a 300 rupee book. Yes or no? Theory can be read also, right? Yeah. So that is a problem. So the advantage is I will get what? I will get the short-term rewards. The benefits are obviously there, but how long will I keep it floating? One South Indian chief minister will perfectly fit the bill. There are so many South Indian chief ministers. Don't assume anyone. There are 5 or 6 states. Yes. He or she may be facilitating a bargain between wealth accumulators and welfare seekers. Am I giving welfare for the sake of welfare, or am I giving the welfare for the sake of development? Am I empowering the citizens? So the cost benefit analysis has to be done accurately. So Narega can obviously be made more efficient and effective. It does not take a rocket science to do that. But what are the logical outcomes? How long will I keep people make do Narega? What are the alternatives? I have to create industries, push them away from agriculture to MSMEs or industries. All these things will take a huge amount of time, economic activity, and all those things which are beyond my control. So the simplest thing is Narega. Yes or no? Clear? Yes. It's like, I don't get to sleep in my hostel. If I come to DNA class, it's much comfortable. So what will I do? Yes.
I will refer to DNS.
Exactly. Right? Missing woods for the trees. Now, extinguishing the tobacco industry's main narrative. Okay. So it's not at all useful for UPSC except the first few lines. You can write this data for value addition. Tobacco kills 13 lakh Indians every year. That is more than COVID has ever done. But still, we don't discuss about tobacco, TB, or any other disease. Even malaria kills more number of people. And around 27 crore people, 27 crore Indians consume tobacco. And India is one country where smokeless tobacco is more popular than smoking. Okay, that means people chew tobacco a lot. Okay, so these are the major themes in this particular article. So,
So, but this article is important to PS4,
right?
because yesterday on industry question related to industry versus technology.
Livelihood.
So here the industry is shutting down and the income that is given.
Nobody is shutting down any industries here, right? What he is saying is, if we increase the tax, there is no problem. But what we call as sin goods. Sin goods, it does not happen, right? Say, for example, none of my friends who smoke, okay, in the last 10 years have quit smoking. And when they started smoking, the price of the cigarette was 2 rupees. Now the price of the cigarette is 15 rupees. They haven't quit. Yes, they only continued the thing. So it's a myth that, that we assume when the price of the smoking, alcohol, and all this increase, people will consume less. But there is no empirical data to argue. Hardly 1 or 2% difference. So what he's saying is, we should tax more so that anyhow people will consume. Government will get more revenue. In the process, if somebody actually stops, that is bonus. Okay, that is bonus. Okay. The major argument is, if the price increases, fake cigarettes will enter the market. That means low quality tobacco will be used, and fake cigarettes will be sold, right? So that the fake market might increase, or illegal black market might increase, which does not. The company will say, I have created only 1,000 cigarettes, but in actuality it might create 2,000 cigarettes. Half is sold in black money or black markets, so it may not come into the account books. That is also one thing. Or counterfeits might also be created. So there are multiple ways to fool the system. But he says, using scientific evidence, there is hardly less than 5% of illegal market in the country. So the rest can be easily manipulated. So as I said the other day, in countries like UK, they don't allow the selling of single cigarettes. They allow only the sale of pack. If you want to smoke, you have to buy the entire pack. Okay, that might be one way to incentivize the population. Brandless, colorless tobacco packets are also one way. In Australia, we have seen this. If you put a plain white packing with cancer, lungs, and all those things, people stopped consuming cigarettes. So there are other ways to pursue or nudge the people to move away from smoking, creating anonymous groups, creating these counseling sessions, encouraging people to quit smoking by behavioral change. These are some civil society plus government things that should be done to reduce smoking, right? So I don't think anyone has stopped smoking by looking at Mukesh ad. Yes, but
they instead made fun of it.
yes, so no, that is one thing. But hardly. I'm sure at least one person might have saved his life by watching that ad. It still is success, right? Out of 100 crores, even if I saved one life, that is welfare maximization. But the problem is, people don't quit smoking that easily. It takes a huge amount of nudge, behavioral change, ecosystem, lot of things to quit smoking. So we should focus on all those things. And these are all sin goods. People don't give up that easily, right? So that's the major thing. Going for different kind of packing, selling only full packets, behavioral changes, counseling sessions, these might help. If school children are falling victim to smoking tobacco products, there is a flaw in the education system. Yes, teachers, parents, society, collectively, all of us are failing to educate the children in the right way. So if we can educate them at the school age itself, probably they will never get addicted to the smoking in the long run. So that is more important. A vociferous article. India is it right to increase the marriage age of 21? The core theme this particular columnist talks about is, all women in India are equal. Muslim women should not be treated like unequal. So if the law is bringing everybody to the age of 21, even Muslim women should also be brought under the particular thing. Because of this incident happening, there is an article in yesterday, I don't think, Siyasat or something, that Muslim families in Hyderabad are, there is an increase in marriage in Muslim families in Hyderabad. More and more young girls are getting married.
Because one day this law may come and
They may not be able to marry their daughters. So there is an increase in marriage in Muslim families in Hyderabad. This is something that I read in a Times of India article or somewhere. Okay, there is a rush for nikah in Hyderabad. Why? Government probably will increase the age. So as I said, India is a very, very different country, right? We have so many fault lines. I don't know which wire if I touch, the reaction is probably government have forced more young girls to get married. Think about it. It's not government's fault. Nowhere it is government fault. But the thing is, this is where we should announce something like demonetization, overnight ban. Every girl should not be married. See, it should not come as a slow thing. It should come as a surprise. Okay, demonetization should not come as a surprise. So she argues 21 should be the norm for all people, including Muslim women. So the laws have to be amended. So this is very much in the lines of Uniform Civil Code, that all religions should not marry their daughters before the age of 21. The other columnist, she argues it should be 18. 18 is fine. Equality is more important. 18 is also fine, but everybody should be married only after the age of 18. So her argument is this. Existing Child Marriages Act and all these things are not able to stop the community marriage. So please imagine what will happen tomorrow if the age is raised to 21. Okay. These women are not children. They are young adults who will find themselves at cross purposes. This new law whereby other adults will be able to render their relationships null and void and leave them completely in the legal limbo.
So the tower I was talking is Prabhash Ranjan.
Okay. For UPSC GS paper to Raja Mohan is more than enough. Nobody else is needed. You get the idea, right? So you will actually invite more people to have a say in girls' marriage if you increase the age to 21. So that is something. So these are all very interesting things that you should notice that can happen only in India. Yes.
So in Rajasthan, recently there was a law which was asking for the child marriages to be registered.
At least it will be helpful for the girl in future if she decides to get a divorce. Okay. So if a marriage is registered after the age of 18, if she realizes, I no longer wants to, want to live with this particular person or something, she will have some legal recourse. So there is a legal limbo. If there is no proof for marriage, there is no case of punishment. As I said, things work in very, very different way in India, right?
So isn't this act explicitly telling that the Child Marriage Act is actually fair? If the people are so confidently coming at this,
Child Marriage Act actually does not punish you or criminalize child marriages, right? It only renders them, in case null and void. It does not prohibit child marriages. It does not legally recognize them. Right? So there are loopholes there also. As I said, societal morality is so different that we cannot legalize, or we cannot criminalize marital rape, child marriages. These are all society problems. Huge volumes are doing this. So it's very difficult for the state to enforce it. But within them, if somebody wants some solution, state have created these acts.
Marriage, property, and all these things are civil cases, right? So in India, already we have uniform civil codes for civil cases.
Criminal cases.
So criminal cases,
Only for criminal we have uniformity. For civil, we don't have uniformity. Murder is murder in all religions, but marriage is not same in any religion. Even property rights, marriage, adoption, birth, death, there are so many complications. So that is why Article 44 of DPSP becomes very, very important. The next political discussion. Yes, Uniform Civil Code. So you can read this particular article. It's not useful for UPSC, but this is something about empathy and compassion. So this particular author says he went to a jail constructed by Adil Shah. There was a statement which says, never make eye contact with a prisoner or you might end up in conversation with him, and do not offer anything out of sympathy. Yes. So prisoners are supposed to be not treated as a human beings. You should not have any sympathy whatsoever towards the criminals. As I keep saying, Dostoevsky says something else. Dostoevsky says a civilization can be judged on the basis of how it treats its criminals. Yes, Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist, he was once a victim of this Russian firing squad. He was also part of this firing squad. That means he was in the line. One by one, everybody was killed. For some reason, his life was spared in the last minute. Okay, so he knows what it is to be the prisoner on the receiving end. So that is where his novels flow from. So he says a civilization can be judged by how it treats its criminals, because we should not fall to their level. We should treat them with our standards. Same point. Okay. So these are the major editorials in the last 3 days. I hope you have read them. Shawshank Redemption, how? They treat them well, right? They gave a library also.
It is when he tries only. Previously, they never used it to treat them. They were like any animal inside, just giving food and getting the labor done.
Nobody utilized that opportunity. I mean, no, the system had this apathy. That point can be accepted. All systems have some apathy, right? So there is a wonderful movie, Court, Netflix. There is a Marathi movie called as Court. You can watch that movie also. It shows how there is an apathy in the entire system. Any questions?
The value question I asked you, I suited from the dilemma I had while watching the movie Padmavat. Alauddin would be fighting very ruthlessly with no rules, but the Rajput king would be fighting with the real rules of the war. But if he practices that, he would lose his entire kingdom, and all the women of that country, they perform Joker. So in such situations, what should that Raja do?
We still remember that Raja for his values. We remember him because of that only, right? That is what he stood for, and he died. See, if somebody is willing to sacrifice his life for believing in something, don't you think we are not smarter than him in judging in that particular scenario? See, every generation will believe in certain principles. If somebody is willing to give up his life for the value he believed, we should with all sincerity assume that given in the time, context, and learning he had, he believed what he's doing is true. If everybody falls to the level of Alauddin Khilji, I might lose the kingdom. I might gain the temporary kingdom, but I'm not setting a universal principle. Probably that Rajput king is setting an example, like all kingdoms should follow the certain values. Yes or no? Then what will happen if everybody follows that rules? What we call as dharma yudh. Even in war, you can be having some humanity, right? Prisoner of war, Vienna Convention, so on and so forth. So probably they are setting that universal standards from that time onwards. I know it's easy to win a war. In the long run, you won't be even remembered, right? Yes. It's not because we are Indians that we are blaming Alauddin Khilji. Even if I talk from humanitarian point of view also, if not following rules and you want something, I won't give that much amount of respect to you. Even if you lost by being very sincere, I still respect you. Yes. The next generation of the world will never believe that there are people like Gandhi or Martin Luther King, right? They may not understand that such people existed, such people who believed in something and they were willing to give their life. It's not possible. Any questions? Which one? Yesterday.
120 MB.
Acha, okay, fine. Yes.
So Sri Lanka's economy is collapsing.
Hmm.
What stakes would India have it to like foster ties with Sri Lanka?
So we are trying to increase the oil dealings. So we are trying to revive the Sri Lankan economy wherever it is possible. The ramifications won't be heavy because the Chinese support is not going to probably come in the same levels that used to come earlier. So I don't think anything will change. Probably Sri Lanka might play Indian part also. They might try to get closer to India to get extra funds by balancing with China. So it might work in favor of India.
So you said the debt diplomacy is no longer working.
Hmm.
Why is it? On what basis did you say?
Because China has already given so many amount of funds. So if they are asking the countries some amount money back, the countries are saying give us more money to reboot the economy.
It's like more like evergreening of their
lines because of COVID.
Hmm.
So it's your virus. We have to evergreen it. But China is not in a position to.
But at the same time, if not paid,
Again, the countries are in a rebellious state. Do whatever you want to do. So, I mean, out of frustration, right? Because the opposition party will come and say, if I come to power, I won't give the money to China back. Yes. Anything else? Please do read newspapers regularly. It's your fodder value addition. In few minutes, you will get the essay paper of 2021. Yes. So this is how it goes. So try not to write the essays because you don't even have practice or anything. So it's a wastage of time. So observe the trends. That much is okay. Invest the time in reading static part, clearing prelims, and doing the basics. Don't waste your 3 hours. Okay. Unless you have done all your syllabus thoroughly. Clear? Yes. Thank you. See you all tomorrow.